Hey, all, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, and today I got another great guest, Ms. Chelsea Cole. She has her own blog called A Duck's Oven. She's written a book called Everyday Sous-Vide. It's all French to me. And she's also Director of Marketing for Vesta Precision, who makes some great sous vide and vacuum sealer products. I'll be right back with Chelsea.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Hey, all, I want to welcome back Inkbird Products as a sponsor of the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Inkbird makes some great thermometers, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all that. But they also make a great instant read thermometer that I really love. It's waterproof, totally rechargeable with USB, very accurate. Everybody should have one of these in their kitchen so they can check the internal temperatures of their food so they don't end up overcooking. Check out the waterproof instant read thermometer below and a link to Amazon from Inkbird. Welcome back, Inkbird Products. Welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today I got another great guest, Miss Chelsea Cole from Vesta Precision Products. I got to spit it out, but I'm sorry, Chelsea. Thanks for being with me. You're up there in Washington State, correct?
I'm actually in Portland. Vesta's in Washington State, but I'm in Portland,
okay.
Oregon. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah, you're in Portland, and Vesta's, so they're not too far away from you up there in the
exactly
upper, western coast up there. So how long have you been with Vesta now?
So I've only been with them officially since March, but I had been doing a lot of freelance recipe development for about a year and a half before then.
All right. Well, let's talk about who you are, where you came from, and all that. So you started out as a blogger. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So I actually started blogging when I was a sophomore in college. So I had never really cooked before. I didn't cook like a lot at home growing up or anything like that, but started, teaching myself how to cook in college because unfortunately I didn't have all the money in the world for takeout, and found that I really loved it. And the blogging world this was in 2010, was much different back then. So back then my blog was like, I'm going to take a few pictures on my crappy cell phone and document this process and just kind of chat about it. But it's kind of, I've stuck with it and adapted it and grown with it over the years. And yeah, it actually helped me find my career path in marketing. So when I was in college, I was like, oh my gosh, food blog, I'm into food. I love this. Since I love food and cooking, that must mean eventually I want to open my own restaurant, which is incredibly naive, as a lot of people will know. And so when I graduated from college, while I was in school, when I first started, I actually thought I wanted to work with kids. And I worked for the Brain Development Lab at the University of Oregon. And that was my first job, was managing the behavioral lab. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to move back to Portland from Eugene, and I'm going to find a job in the restaurant industry. And so I did. I actually landed my opening job as an assistant manager and found that it was not for me. Just because you love cooking does not mean you want to work in the restaurant industry. What do you know? And so I kind of pivoted towards marketing. I was like, okay, the things that I love so much about this and about my blog are much more marketing related. And so I actually spent a year in Cape Town, South Africa with my husband while he was getting his master's degree. And during that time, started doing some remote freelance marketing and did my blog full time. And then when I got back, I jumped into my first kind of real marketing jobs and have been working in marketing and freelance marketing and blogging ever since.
Yeah, I started out back when I was younger, back in my teens, in the restaurant business. Started out washing dishes, and then I cooked, thinking, this is going to be a great career. And then I got married and figured out, the money there is not the best. The hours stink, and you're usually, you're working two jobs because you can't really support yourself. Even if you get into, management, you can't really support yourself or a family on the wages you make, and then the hours are ridiculous. So I spent about 10 years in the restaurant business before I decided to get into banking. So, but I feel you there. It's everybody always thinks, I'm a good cook, I should be in the restaurant business, or people tell me that all the time. Oh, you should open a restaurant. I'm like, no.
It kind of kills your love of cooking, because then it's your job, and a lot of times you don't have any control over what you're cooking, so it's just not at all at all related.
Yeah, and it's, just the like I said, the money, the pressure, the different hours. It's just, I see these guys that, go through culinary school, and they come out and they get their first taste of actually working in a restaurant, and they hate it, because it's nothing what they thought it was. It's nothing like it is in the movie. So, maybe that movie Chef, is about it, where the guys actually go crazy because they're, they're alcoholic and drug addicts because they work so many hours. But there's the restaurant business is really tough. The profit margins are thin. You can't make a lot of money in it. That's the restaurants come and go all the time, because people's tastes change all the time, and profit margins are always fluctuating. So it's really hard to make that a career, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Like I suffered so much in the beginning because I worked an opposite schedule from my husband, and that is really hard and horrible. And I'm a morning person, and working nights wasn't, it's just awful. But I will say it helped me a lot in the long run, because the company that I worked for, they've got 8 locations here in Oregon. So it's just like a really small Italian chain. And they ended up hiring for my second marketing role. So, it kind of did come back around, and all of my marketing jobs have been in the food industry, because that's what I love to talk about and love to market, and I can speak passionately about. So it did help in the long run. And I mean, I think everybody will talk about the excellent life lessons they learned from working in the restaurant industry, but it's a lot easier to say that with that door behind you.
Right. Yeah. And I talked to a lot of people like Eric Villegas from, VacMaster, David from PolyScience. These guys, loved when they were in the restaurant business. It was a lot of work, but now they have these jobs that they can still, exercise their profession, but it's a lot less, stressful, and, they're not worried about, cooking for, 400 people a night and making sure they make money and everything else. I mean, especially Chef, Eric Villegas, he owned a couple different restaurants, and he said, now this is just like, all he does, he goes around and, prepares, recipes, and does the, shows for VacMaster, represents them, and he has a blast, does the videos and all that. And it's it's the easiest job in the world, he says. He does, because then he can do what he loves and not have the pressure that goes along with it, usually, if you're working in the restaurant business. So
Yep, totally. That's been my understanding too.
So let's get back in talking about your blog. I'm going to share the screen again. It's called The Duck's Oven. Where did that come from?
So that was from my alma mater. So I went to the University of Oregon, whose mascot is the Ducks. And my then boyfriend, now husband, actually named my blog. And it's supposed to be a play on Dutch oven. And I've just kind of stuck with it ever since. A lot of people will rebrand frequently, but I still love it. And Oregon's been my home my whole life. So I feel like it's applicable still.
Yeah. And have you find it easy to keep it up with it over the years, even though you've started different careers and all that?
Totally not. It's fluctuated quite a bit. So like my first job working at the Brain Lab was much more lax and very casual hours, let's say. So it was super easy then. And then of course, when I transitioned to the restaurant industry, it was very difficult to maintain. So it was very sporadic for a time. And then in the past few years, it's been a lot easier. So after I left the restaurant industry, my first job as a digital marketing specialist was at a startup. A seafood startup here in Portland, which you can imagine that also was a little difficult to maintain the blog with. But then I actually transitioned into a part-time role after that, and did a mix of, my day job, blogging, and freelancing. So, and I don't have kids yet. So that makes my time a little freer too. But it's definitely hard, and blogging has evolved so much over the last 10 years. Like I said in the beginning, when I first started, it was like crappy iPhone photos and let's just babble for, 800 words. In fact, my most popular blog post is from 2011. and it was a tutorial on how to make a can of Campbell's tomato soup taste better. So just the types of things you blog about, and like the approach I would take to determining what I was going to blog about at any given time were so much different than they are today. In fact, I made the commitment to write my cookbook when I wrote my cookbook in 2018, but started blogging about sous vide cooking in 2017. And I saw that all these sous vide posts that I was doing were getting a lot of traffic. And I was like, this is interesting. And it's because at the time there was so little sous vide content, especially for home cooks. And so I was like, okay, I think that this is going to be like a good topic to write a book about, because people are looking for more of this. And I loved doing it. So my blog has really dictated my career in all aspects, including my book. So yeah.
So when you did the book, I guess it's a spinoff from your blog. So that got you excited into writing. So how difficult was it to go from just writing a weekly or biweekly or monthly blog to actually writing a book? Because I've talked to several authors and they all have pretty much the same comeback. So
yeah, it's hard. I mean, I will say I get like, I have a little bit of shiny object syndrome. So I'll get obsessed with an idea and then just dive full into it. So when I decided to write a book, I was transitioning to a new job. I was building a home, which is a lot of work. And I was like, okay, I guess this is a great time to write a book. And so I actually did manage to do it in about 6 months, which is pretty quick. But it was a lot of work, and I think more than I anticipated. And it becomes kind of grueling. Like I typically so for my book, I wrote everything, wrote every recipe, did all the photography. It was all done by me except the design. I had a friend help me with that. So I love doing those things typically, but when you've written so many words, it's exhausting. And especially, writing, just like getting creative enough to pull out different food descriptors, even just like becomes really, really hard. But one thing that was great about writing my book was how supportive the sous vide community was for me. So I managed to find recipe testers and sous vide Facebook groups I was in. And then once the book did launch, so many people supported it, which was so kind, both here in Portland and in the wider sous vide community. So I had a really good support system, both like at home. My mom, for example, was my kitchen assistant when I would recipe test and shoot recipes, meaning she mostly just did dishes. She's a saint. And, I had support from the world. So it was really great in that sense. And I felt like I connected with a lot of people. But again, it's one of those things where the hard work's behind me. So it's easy for me to, wax poetic about the process now.
now, did you work with a publisher, or did you self-publish, or?
Self-published.
Yeah.
So I was like, I did a lot of research, and I actually, during that time, found a mentor here in Portland. Her name's Diane Morgan, and she's written 18 cookbooks, including one all about salmon, if anybody has access to a lot of salmon. But and I talked with her and I was like, so what are your thoughts on publishing traditionally or self-publishing? And, there's lots of other great people to talk to. Jason Logsdon has so many great resources about it. And she said, after having traditionally published 18 cookbooks, she would not traditionally publish again. And part of the reason is now all these cookbook authors, a lot of them are bloggers or food influencers or things like that, who can do more than develop recipes. And so publishing houses rely on them for their own photography. And a lot of times, even if you aren't photographing the recipes yourselves, you are on the hook to use your advance to hire a photographer. And same thing with a lot of other people that you need to make your book happen. So you end up spending so much of your advance, you barely come out even, and then you barely, the percentage of your royalties is much, much smaller when you go traditional publishing route. So I ended up self-publishing because I was like, well, I was not young, I don't know, it wasn't that long ago, but still, and like, I can do all this work myself, I can figure it out, it's gonna be fine. And I wanted to make a better cut on it. And I also wanted to fully own my book. So if you traditionally publish the cover is up to the publishing house. The content is really up to the publishing house. And I wanted control over all of that. And they get to determine what your book runs are like. So like how many copies of your book get printed, where they're sold, if they might go out of stock somewhere. So like Diane Morgan, for example, had a book that they decided to no longer print anymore. And she was trying to figure out how to get the rights back so she could keep printing it. So I just really wanted that control. And I think I would go that way again. Part of me, we actually developed a resource, me and the designer who did the book, for other food bloggers to teach them how to self-publish. And I kind of want to traditionally publish a book just so I can compare and contrast the experiences for myself. But I think my next book will probably be a self-published book as well.
So how do you go about getting like the hard copy of the book done? I mean, is there places that you can do that will actually do it? I know a lot of people do it. They start off doing the ebooks, which is, pretty much, that's really easy. You don't have to worry about actually physically, having a physical product to put out. Who did you work with? Does Amazon have that kind of setup within its structure to do that?
Yep. Amazon does it all. So I've looked into, and I need to, honestly, it just takes a lot of time and effort, and I haven't wanted to devote the time and effort to it. But I need to look into other means for self-publishing. But right now my book is exclusively available on Amazon, and they have a self-publishing platform called KDP, and they print on demand. So what that means is if somebody orders a copy of my book on Amazon, then they print it. So they don't have like a stockpile of my books sitting in a warehouse somewhere. It's
Gotcha.
only printed when someone buys it, which is great for me too, because that means I'm not sitting on 3,000 books and like have all this pressure to sell them. Yeah. So it's really nice.
Yeah. And that's, with anything, I mean, I have people I've talked to, like Malcolm Reed. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a big barbecue guy. But when he first started selling his barbecue rub, you got to order like 400 cases of it, not knowing if it's even going to sell. So, yeah. I mean, and that's a pretty big risk you're taking. He had to front a bunch of money, store it in his own garage, and try to, sell it. Hopefully somebody was going to buy it. So I could understand it, not wanting to publish a book and have it, cases of them sitting somewhere and collecting dust. But
yep.
There's many different ways in it's this electronic age anymore. I mean, I don't know how much longer people are going to actually buy physical books. So to be able to have that option to where they can, print it on demand when somebody actually wants it is pretty great. So.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yes. That was one of the big reasons I went with it.
So let's walk into how that got you involved with Vesta Precision. So how did you end up going there and being part of their marketing, or actually their marketing director?
Yeah. This is like the power of, networking and community for me. So like when I first published my book here in Portland, so many people were kind and awesome and supportive and invited me to all of their holiday markets. So I self-published, or my book was published over a Black Friday weekend, which just like set me up for the holiday season, which was really great. And so I did like 12 markets that season. And some of those were open houses at a kitchen supply store here in Portland. And they have like 4 locations here in Portland. And they sell Vesta Precision products. And they exclusively sell their immersion circulators. And so the woman who I worked with to get set up there and who bought my books for their store connected me with Vesta just to be like, hey, you guys might be able to talk about something. And they at the time needed help with recipe development and photography for social media. So I started doing some freelance work for them with that, which was great. And so I did that for about a year, or maybe 8 months. And then they also asked me for help managing their social media channels. So I started doing a little bit of that. And then they asked if I would just come on their team and lead their marketing efforts. So it was kind of a little bit of a process and so fortuitous. And it's pretty incredible. I mean, for me to just like reflect and think about the fact that I was blogging about Sous-Vide and then decided to write a cookbook, and now I get to work here full time.
So do you end up having to go into the office much at all, or do you do most of your work from home?
Well, pre-COVID, I was going up about once a month, and then now I've just been home. So I do most of the work from home because Seattle's about 3 hours away. So I'll take the train up every now and then. But typically, yeah, I just work from my home office here in Portland.
Yeah, me and my wife both, work from home, and we worked from home, even before COVID. So it's actually quite nice to be able to do most of your work from, electronically now. So,
Yep.
phone, it used to be fax, but now you don't even need fax anymore with email and scans and everything else. So it's really great to be able to work from, your house. That's for sure.
Mhm.
So what's a day in a life when you first came on board in marketing? What did they have you doing?
So there'd been less of a cohesive marketing strategy in place when I first came on. So I've been working on making that a little more well-rounded. As I'm sure with everyone, COVID has frankly changed things. And so a lot of the more fun projects that we had in mind on the back burner until later. And so we're doing some of the more basic stuff right now. So for example, one of my big projects lately has been around Google Ads. So kind of getting that whole program up and running, optimizing our website, optimizing our Amazon listings, all of the things like that. So it's really just like the basics of making sure that people know who we are, understand what we have to offer them, and are excited to buy it and understand why it's better than others.
So that, as far as I know, I think Vesta started out pretty much on doing the food bags, just the vacuum sealer bags. Is that correct? Or
No, actually, mostly just sous vide equipment at first. And so now we do a lot of bags and rolls, and then we have a lot of vacuum sealers as well.
and when did they start actually producing the sous vide equipment and vacuum sealers?
Very recently. So most of our models have only been available for about a year, and some of them about a year and a half. So very, very new.
And what got them started into doing the sous vide equipment and vacuum sealers?
Our CEO has worked in this industry for decades. So he's worked in the small kitchen appliance industry for forever. And so he fell in love with sous vide in the thousands. What do you call aughts, I guess, is what that decade's technically called. And then decided he wanted to develop his own company a few years ago. And so he's really dove into it since then. And he wanted to create products that were designed both for chefs and for home cooks, but he also took the approach of talking to chefs in particular and figuring out what types of products they actually wanted in their kitchen and what would make things easier for them. And then applied those to products for our consumers as well.
So instead of like with Anova and Jewel, where most of their products started out like with one product geared towards the consumer, it looks like they came out with all at once. They wanted to cover both the consumer and the commercial side, the restaurants, the caterers, stuff like that. Did they help develop a lot of these products? Were a lot of these products off the shelf and they just stuck their name on it? How did it work?
No, they definitely helped develop a lot of them. So it was in partnership with Chef Jason, whose last name I am spacing right now, out of Seattle. He actually worked with our CEO, Bob, to help develop a lot of these products. So like, for example, the flip front technology design that we have on some of the Immersion models, that was designed because the chef was like, I want to be able to see what's happening with my Immersion Circulator from across the room. So it was developed that way.
So the commercial products came at the same time. So that came, I guess, from the chefs giving the input. What about the consumer side? Is it they saw what was out there and they decided they want to see if they could make something a little bit better?
Yep, pretty much. Yep. And just figure out what consumers were looking for. So for example, a good example of that, one thing I love, our Vac and Seal Elite vacuum sealers actually have built-in storage for a roll of vacuum seal bags, and you can cut it within there too. So that's that model, on the right there. So you can cut it right within there, which is great. And it helps you save on storage. Like one of the biggest complaints from home cooks is I don't need another gadget. Like where am I going to put another gadget? And so we've been trying to think about that as we develop new things. For example, our vertical vac, which I can't wait till it's back in stock. is a chamber vacuum sealer. And those are so popular and they're so useful for people who sous vide a lot or just like vacuum seal a lot. But most chamber vacuum sealers are massive. And this one's compact and pretty enough that it looks good living on your counter if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And I think this within the last year or two, the chamber vacuum sealers geared more towards the home user have been starting to get a little bit more popular. Even VacMaster, after, they've had a couple models that came out that just they've had issues with that they'd come and go, but everybody's starting to notice that if you can make something that's, around the $500-600 range and that can fit on their, counter and not take up a whole bunch of room, there's a big market for that because people want that kind of, performance that you can get out of a chamber sealer. They don't want to spend $1,000 and they don't want to have it take up half of their counter.
We've gotten a lot of fishermen and hunters who love this. My dad is a fisherman and a hunter, and I let him borrow mine after he shot an elk last year. And a lot of these people are just so excited about this because it's easy to transport. It looks pretty, it's affordable. And so it's really been big in the hunting and fishing communities.
And going back to these, the Immersion Circulator, the Immersa here, with the flat design, I can really see, I like, one of the first circulators I ever had actually had the front facing design, and I like that better than all the other ones out there that are, you have to attach to the back of your container, and you got to kind of look and try to, sometimes you got to kind of angle your head the right way to be able to see the numbers on it because just the way the LEDs are. But that's one of the things I did notice on this. It is easy to see, but it also does have, the Wi-Fi and, Bluetooth control that people are demanding nowadays. Not that I see a big need to have something with Wi-Fi on it that you're setting and letting it go for hours on end, but people want it. I mean, it's just like anything now. Even with the barbecue grills and smokers, people are demanding it because there's a lot of models that have it. So they're looking to have that control where they can be somewhere else and look at and monitor their cook or what have you. So, but
and I'm with you there. I honestly never use the Wi-Fi capability because I don't know. I just turn it on and let it go. And then another thing I love about that model too, just because intuitively it makes sense to me, is the electrical housing isn't sitting directly above evaporating water. So it's gonna last longer than a traditional stick model. So I like that too, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a little bit different shape. So I think we said something about this before to you, is that, the standard lids that are out there that fit like the Innova size or the Joule size won't work with it, but it's really easy to use, sous vide balls or something else if you need a lid. So, I mean, it's overall performance wise, it looks like it does a lot better a job. Like you said, there's some benefits to it. And, if it gets, more popular, I guess somebody will make a lid for it, but
yep, totally. Exactly. That's the goal.
or a container. So how come you guys haven't decided to look into making containers like some of the other manufacturers have?
You know what? I don't know. We've developed other things. I think that they're officially live on the website. We now have vacuum sealable, Tupperware type containers. And a few other things that we've got in the works, but you know what? I'm not totally sure. I'll ask our product development guy and see what his response to that is.
Yeah, the thing of it is, somebody mentioned the other, I think it was on Jason's show you were on the other day, mentioned the Pavi, which it's really just a storage container with a lid. I mean, they didn't really design it for sous vide. It's actually a food storage container with a lid, a hole cut in it the right way. And it's, there's plenty of those on Amazon and other places, but, at least with it, the ones that Nova made they actually made them for sous vide. So they do have some things built into it that's strictly designed for sous vide. And I can see where those are going to be a little bit more popular down the road. You can put a sous vide circulator in any kind of container. There's no doubt about it. And I actually have a, Coleman cooler that I use when I do my big barbecue stuff. Like if I want to do a whole pack of brisket, I can fit it on a Coleman cooler where I cut a hole in the top and stick my stick circulator in there. But, it's also good to have something that's built for sous vide, with certain things built into it, like some of the other containers out there. So I can see where that could be a good seller for you guys, since you do have all these other things like the Sous-Vide Cart. Let's talk about that Sous-Vide Cart real quick. I'm gonna get that back up on the screen, because that's something where it looks to me like it's built for, the restaurant use.
Yep.
And it's quite expensive, but I can see where somebody, could actually use this in their home as well. But it's really designed to be used in a restaurant.
Exactly. Yep. We developed it because, again, this was like our CEO having conversations with chefs and figuring out what they need. And chefs love it. So we've got a chef up in Seattle and another chef in Portland who are awesome. And they use it as essentially a mobile prep station. So the great thing about it is it's got electrical in it. So you can and it's got a super, super long cord. So you can put it anywhere in your kitchen. In fact, the chef here in Portland, during off hours, he has it out in his dining room, but he's able to plug it in. So it just turns into another workspace. And then it houses he's got a vertical vac elite in it, a vacuum, just a standard vacuum sealer, and his water bath and immersion circulator, like all set up in it. And then we have actually too some home cooks who use it next to their barbecues. So they'll set up massive stations where they have their barbecue right next to like essentially a sous vide station on their patio. So it's pretty cool.
I don't think Guga does that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. He has one of our carts.
No, I know. I saw his video on it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's it definitely I can see where a restaurant or even somebody that does sous vide a lot could use that to have a good setup there, especially with that chamber vac sitting right there. It looks like it fits right in there. So
yep, that's exactly what it's designed for.
Have you as far as products go, have you found that most of the bath type units that you sell, like this here, are they mostly sold to restaurants? Do consumers actually still buy these type of units with the
restaurants mostly, for sure. And then we still have some like old school sous vide users who prefer them. And I think it's just it's honestly mostly folks who have a massive kitchen and always have their water bath out anyways, but it's definitely more commercial than consumer.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at those and actually was sent one that kind of did a little bit of everything. And the thing I didn't like about it was you're kind of stuck in the size there. So like with a regular circulator, a stick circulator, what have you, at least you can change containers and, have different size options, but you're locked into something. If I got this smaller one here, let's just say, and I was using it at home and I wanted to cook, something a little bit larger, I'm pretty much stuck on the space there. So, but I can see where if you're in a restaurant and you're using it for fish, all the time or what have you, or,
poached eggs,
or even just steaks. And it's, you're cooking the same thing over and over again. And then I can see that, being a good setup as well. Then you don't have to worry about the separate container and all that. You can just turn it on and go.
Totally.
You also offer up packages, and so people can actually just buy a sous vide circulator and a vacuum sealer together with some bags, like a pretty much ready to go kit. That has been really popular on your website.
Yes, very. It's because if you're getting into it and people will, like, I know a lot of people who just start off by getting an immersion circulator, but it's so nice to have the vacuum sealer too. Like it makes cooking sous vide so much easier. So a lot of people now, and our kits are really affordable too, considering all the things that it comes with. So they've been very, very popular.
Yeah. I mean, I run a fairly large sous vide group, and you always have people, especially new people, come in asking, what vacuum sealer should I use? What sous-vide circulator? What container do I use? So it's always good to be able to suggest something to where, especially something that's affordable for them. You don't want to send them to go buy $250, sous vide circulator by itself, and then have to worry about going out and buying $100 vacuum sealer, and then another $50 for a container or what have you. If you can get them something in the $100 to $200 range and have the whole package, it's always good. And
Totally.
especially if they're just starting, they don't know if they're going to continue on with it, or I'm always one, I like to dip my toe in the water. I don't like to go out and buy a $1,200 something if I don't know if I'm going to actually continue to do it. So I did that when I started doing I got a ceramic grill. I wanted to make sure I wanted to cook that way. So instead of buying the $1,000 grill first, I got something that was maybe $300. It's similar, to see if I like that way of cooking before I took the leap and bought something a little bit more expensive. And I always, tell people that that's what they should do. Don't run out and buy the most expensive thing and, dive too deep into it, because all you're going to do is frustrate yourself. And I've seen people do it. If they spend a lot of money up front, they expect more out of it than if they just spent a little bit and then, work their way through it.
Yep. I think that's exactly right. And I think, one thing that I'm passionate about is, bringing sous vide to the broader cooking community. And I think kits like this make that happen, because one of the biggest questions I get is, what do I need to start with sous vide? And it's like, oh, you need this one thing, order this one thing, and then you will have everything you need to start with sous vide. You can buy my book too, but this one little kit will get you completely set up with everything you need.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's talk about the Sous Vide Summit. You're going to be part of the Sous Vide Summit for the first time. Last year was the first year. I wasn't able to make it. I was, invited to come, but I had my schedule was already pre-booked before, when they invited me to come. I was looking forward to being in San Francisco this year, but unfortunately, it's going to have to be virtual this year. So, what are you looking to get out of the Sous Vide Summit this year?
Yeah, I am super excited. I also, I was in Europe last summer, which is crazy to think about. And so I wasn't able to attend. So I'm really excited to be a part of it this year. But yeah, I was kind of commenting on when I was talking about my book, the sous vide community is such a fun community. And, I always feel like I've met everyone who's in it, but there's always more people to meet. And so I'm really excited to connect with all of these people and to learn more. I mean, sous vide a lot. And I always feel like I've got a good handle on most things, but it's always great to hear from other people. And I also always think it's interesting, having worked in the restaurant industry for so many years myself, and working with chefs now, learning more about how sous vide is used in the restaurant industry now, since it's still difficult to use sous vide in restaurant kitchens.
Right.
So I'm curious to learn more about that. And then I just started talking about this a little bit, but I still think sous vide is not as mainstream as it could be. When I first got into sous vide cooking, I had heard about sous vide for some time, but I was nervous to try it myself, because I interpreted it as being this very sciencey guy gadget. It's got a reputation for being such a guy gadget and for food nerds. And I'm like, I don't know. And then my mom just got me one for my birthday, and that's how I got into it. And I was like, okay, guess I'm going to try this thing now. And I love it. And I think the idea of it being for food nerds is kind of silly, because it actually simplifies the cooking process. It takes most of the hard work out for you. So if you are a home cook who wants to try more adventurous cooking, or who wants to buy an expensive steak for Valentine's Day but doesn't want to ruin it, sous vide is going to help you do that. And so I want people to be more comfortable with it. So I'm excited to connect with other people at the conference who maybe are in more of the space I am, who are talking to home cooks or who are home cooks. So hopefully I'll get the opportunity to do that.
One of the things that intrigued me about it when I first saw it, and I was like 2.5 years ago, was my first exposure to it. and a light bulb went off in my head because I was really big into barbecue and had been, and I've cooked for a long time. I do all the cooking here, cooking's always been a passion of mine. And when I started playing around with it, I figured, I liked low and slow barbecue, but I figured that this process was the ultimate low and slow because you could dial in the lower temperature doneness for, like, say, brisket or beef ribs or something like that, and still make them super tender and medium rare or what have you, or medium, which you really can't do when you use the barbecue or the smoker by itself. You can make them tender, but usually you got to get them well done, over 200 degrees before that collagen and the connective tissue and everything breaks down to make it more tender. But with sous vide, you can actually do it in there and then throw it on the smoker to get the smoke and the bark and combining them. And that's what I'm going to be speaking about in the Sous Vide Summit, is how you can take two cooking methods like smoking and sous vide and make something totally different when you combine the two than you could make with either one of those on their own. So you can make a tender brisket or beef ribs in the smoker, but you can't make a medium rare. You can make, tender, medium rare brisket in the sous vide, but you can't get that smoke and bark unless you put it in the smoker. So you combining those two methods, you can make something totally you couldn't make any other way. So that's the kind of thing that really excites me about sous vide. And I want to get people to start looking at sous vide as more of a process instead of a good way to cook a steak or a good way to cook a chicken breast or a pork chop. And that's what everybody's first impression is that it's great with steaks, then they discount it for anything else. But it is so much more than that. And you can, the whole process is just so much more because of its exact temperature cooking, low temperature cooking, that it can do so much more. And that's what I like to spread and show people, because once you get them more excited about it and go, hey, man, this thing can do so much more than I ever thought it could, that's when they start, the light bulb goes off in their head. So.
Yep. And I think too, like, I love to sous vide and smoke too. It's one of my favorite cooking methods. Anything I smoke now, I do sous vide first. And I think people overestimate the equipment that it takes to do that. Like, I had somebody ask me on Instagram, like, what is your setup like? Because wow, you cook all these meals, like, you must have so much equipment that you have for that. Like, we don't have a yard where we live, and we only have a tiny little balcony. So I've got a little Green Mountain Grill Davy Crockett sitting on my balcony and a camping grill in my sous vide, and that's it. And so it really doesn't take much to be able to do that. And the food that you produce with it is mind blowing. Like, I made brisket and pastrami last month, and my dad was like, this is the best brisket I've ever had. And I was like, well, that's a high compliment coming from you. So I don't think people know that all that they can do with it.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's one of the things that drove me into doing what I do, is teaching people that, it can do so much more. And I like to do experiment and try new things. And a bunch of the people that are in my group, they think just like I do. And a lot of people that are in the Sous Vide Summit, are the same way, like Jason and Mike and Lloyd and Kevin, some of these guys that, we all chat about this stuff all the time and see what we can do to experiment and try something new, and then show it to people and say, look, it's not just a, steak machine. It's not a George Foreman grill or an Instapot. This thing can do so much more. And, I get people all the time still, when I talk about cooking a brisket or beef ribs, they'll go, oh man, you're cooking something for 2 or 3 days. It's like, yeah, but you don't have to do anything with it. Yeah. You just turn it on and let it go. It's not like when you're cooking a brisket on the smoker alone for 12 hours, you got to babysit the fire, make sure that, you got enough wood in there and all that. And even with a pellet grill, you got to make sure you don't run out of pellets, and all that. So sorry if you heard that. That's a storm coming my way.
Oh,
man, lightning. So we better get this thing wrapped up, because I might lose my power.
Yeah. Oh God.
But yeah, that's what I love to do. And I like to show people that, and I like to experiment and just show people how much more that sous vide can do, especially when you mix it with other cooking methods. Sometimes people get they try to make cooking methods fight each other. I don't know. Like some of the barbecue guys go, you're boiling stuff, and you can only cook something this way. And I always like to experiment, try new things, try different types of food. That's just the way I am, and I always like to show other people how to do it as well. So I like to cook, brisket 100 different ways. I don't like to just one way. I don't like to just cook things one way and that's it. So.
And I think that's where, we are the experimenters, and then we share what works best for us. And that's one of my favorite things to do as well.
So this is the Sous-Vide Summit's going to be your first one. It's virtual this year, but do you do other events and stuff with Vesta?
Well, I'm fairly new. I was supposed to do a lot this year, and they all got canceled.
Unfortunately.
So we were supposed to be at several different trade shows, and we were looking into even having a presence at a lot of food blogger conferences and things like that. But that's all going to be postponed for a minute. But yes, in the future, there definitely will. And I've also done some live classes, cooking classes. We did it like a steak and eggs themed one with Vesta too. So look out for those every now and then. Yeah.
Now, I think we discussed this on Jason's show the other day. I'm sure just like everybody else right now, Vesta's having some issues getting product in.
Yep. Unfortunately, we've got a fair amount of out of stock. And so our strategy right now is overproducing and over ordering in anticipation for the holidays. So that's what we're hoping will work out. But we're just kind of rolling with it and hoping that people will be patient, but we'll see.
Gotcha. Any ETA on like some of the vacuum sealers, like the vertical and all that?
Theoretically, early August. So keep your fingers crossed, and hopefully they'll be here soon.
Yeah, I think a lot of the manufacturers are the same boat. They're all waiting. Literally, they're waiting for the boats, to come back over. So and there's a lot of demand, pent up demand as well, because they've had it, for so long. That just not been able to get stuff, or they've slowed down their sales because of the waning inventory. But I'm looking forward to everything to get back to normal. That's for sure.
Me too. My husband's a teacher, so I've been cooped up at home with him trying to teach his students, which has been fun. So
is there anything new coming out that Vesta is going to be releasing soon? Anything you can talk about?
Yeah, I can kind of tease one thing. We're still experimenting with it, but we will have biodegradable vacuum seal bags, which is super exciting. So I think we all feel a little bit guilty about the plastic waste that comes with sous vide cooking and in vacuum seal storage in general. So that's going to be really, really nice for that. And then we do have one other thing that I can't talk too much about, but that's also going to reduce plastic waste in a few months. So.
Yeah, biodegradable bags would be a really big seller for sure, because those, I don't know, I see people all the time try to use those silicone reusable bags, and they just, I tried to use one once and I'll never use one again. It's just, they're hard to clean. They don't work good. You can't use, you're stuck with a certain size. And I see people in the groups all the time, they want to be, enviro conscious. So they don't want to keep using, vacuum sealer bags, but there's just no good option out there for a reusable bag. So biodegradable would be a huge seller, I'm sure. So any ETA on that being able to come out?
Not quite sure, but it should be before the holidays.
Okay, great.
So so hopefully this
something to shoot for, but definitely. Yeah. I think that would be a really good option there, because it comes up all the time, especially for new people, that they don't want to keep throwing out plastic bags. I can understand that,
Yep.
So.
But, and I feel the same way. So yeah.
But those silicone bags are just, forget it.
You buy them and then they last like 4 uses. So it's like, okay, that didn't really help me much.
No, yeah. And they're difficult to use. I mean, and they're just, hard to get things in and out of them. And you can't really wash them that well. It's just, they're not good at all. So, and I've seen several different kinds, and none of them are worth it. So I always suggest people just do it, because those things are not going to be good. You're going to end up throwing those away, like you said, after 4 or 5 uses anyway. So how is that going to help you? But, well, all right, Chelsea, I want to thank you for being on. If there's anything else you want to bring up about Vesta or yourself?
Sorry, there's a very loud motorcycle outside right now. One more quick thing. My cookbook this week is officially available on Kindle. So if you prefer reading on Kindle, my cookbook is finally available there. And then I love to talk to people. I am super, super active on Instagram in particular. So come find me at A Duck's Oven, and I'd love for us to become Instagram friends.
Now, do you actually have control over the Vesta's Facebook page or anything like that as well? Or
Yep. So if you go to both of those channels too, I will be there too. I'm on all of it.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll put in the description, make sure people have all the links. So this is going to be on YouTube, Facebook, and anywhere people get podcasts. So they'll be able to find you. They'll be able to find you wherever they are. But that's awesome. Let me ask you, you said that your book's now on Kindle. Did it not start out on Kindle for some reason?
No, Kindle is a beast. Because so you'll notice, like, when you read a Kindle book, you can adjust the font sizes and like flip different pages and all this stuff. So the file, you can technically upload a PDF, but it's a really poor experience, and I just didn't want to do that. So I worked with a friend of mine to make it the right way. So it's completely dynamic. So it's linked within itself. It's linked to the web, and then you can like adjust font sizes and it'll do its thing within that. So no, it took a long time.
I didn't know if that was something that Amazon, kind of helped you do through their self-publishing thing, but I guess not.
Nope. They don't help you at all. In fact, so that part's a little tough, but.
Well, now I learned something. So if I ever want to write a book, I don't know. Everybody I've talked to that wrote a book just has told me how hard it was. It's like giving birth. So I don't know. I
will say it is hard, but now that you've heard all that though, maybe it'll be less hard than you think. And it is like a very nice it's not at all a lot of money. You just don't make a lot of money from writing books unless you're, Martha Stewart. But it's a nice source of tiny passive income. So
yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Chelsea Cole from Vesta Precision and A Duck's Oven blog. And what's the name of the book? Everyday Sous-Vide, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Everyday Sous-Vide on Amazon. I will make sure all the links are going to be in the description below, so they'll be able to find you everywhere. And I will see you also at the Sous-Vide Summit, August 21st to the 23rd, virtually. So make sure you guys sign up for the Sous-Vide Summit put on by the International Sous-Vide Association.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
I really appreciate you being on. I'm sure you'll be on again soon.
Sounds good. And I'll link out myself as well.
All righty. Thanks. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I want to thank Chelsea Cole one more time of Vesta Precision and the Duck's Oven blog. Make sure you follow her. Check out the links below. And make sure you also follow the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. Make sure you follow the Fire and Water Cooking YouTube channel, Facebook group and Facebook page, and Instagram. And I'll see you guys on the next Fire and Water Cooking Podcast.